Gentlemen, such an honor, such a privilege to have both of you on the stage at the same time. Obviously, the technology ecosystem needs people like yourselves. I think between the two of you, you really are able to facilitate and accelerate exactly what we need in this country, from the money side, of course, with Penjana, and from the commercialization aspect with you, Safuan. I think there's a lot of stuff to get through, and we've literally been inundated with questions from the audience, both physically and virtually. So let's start off with getting some context in terms of where we are as a country. I mean, it's been literally a quarter of a century since Tun Dr. Mahathir, gave fruition to the idea of a multimedia super corridor way back at the Technology Park, Malaysia, which is now, of course, MRANTI Park, right, in Bukit Jadil. Where do you think we are, hand on heart, realistically, honestly, where are we in Malaysia on the technology roadmap versus our peers? I think maybe we'll start with Safuan.
Let's get the show on the road. Thank you so much. Assalamualaikum, very good morning. Thank you for inviting MRANTI here. On behalf of Zulera, warm regards from her. Yeah. In terms of sort of like a sit rep, kind of like introduction. In terms of where we are today, so I was just reading in terms of our Global Innovation Index. I'm not sure in terms of whether we look at it in a positive sense that we are staying put, but we are certainly not moving up. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, in terms of we are at level 30, number 36. I wish we could have done better. Yeah. So I think in terms of growth of ecosystem, definitely much more vibrant now in terms of the startup ecosystem as opposed to where we were when we started off with the MSC Malaysia initiative. Yeah, back then there was even no magic, yeah, no MRANTI. I think in terms of we have we have our 2 years ago or 3 years ago, people were complaining, where's our unicorn? Yeah. And then suddenly we have Qasim and nobody ever talked about the unicorn anymore. Yeah. But again, if you look at our neighbor in Indonesia and Singapore, we are far behind. If we say 1, they say 9, another one say 20, right? So, but are we measuring in terms of ourselves, in terms of unicorn? I have to also share that in terms of ecosystem-wise, I am proud in terms of what I'm seeing now, in terms of the collaboration. As mentioned earlier, I think part of the responsibility of the agency is not just talking about our own programs, but also, put ourselves in the shoes of the entrepreneurs, the SMEs, and the startups. It's kind of confusing, isn't it, guys? Yeah, there's so many agencies offering so many different kind of programs with all different kind of funds. It's just right there in front of you. You can see it, but you can assess it. Yeah. So I mean, it's kind of like a lot of the time. I spend a lot of time with, outside of the agency shoes. Yeah. Some of you are personal friends to me. I spend time with them to understand what is the true scenario out there. Yeah. So I think in terms of, to sum it up, we make some advancement, but not to say that we have done with what we need to. Certainly a lot more need to be done. Again, from an ecosystem perspective, visibility of Malaysia in terms of where we are, in terms of, and the technology that we are pushing forward. Funding is another matter, but I think my esteemed friend here will cover that part of fund. Yeah, I am talking about the FUN. He has the D in the fund. Yeah, so yeah.
Taufiq, where are we at?
Thank you, Su Chuang. I am deeply grateful for the opportunity to be heard given to me today. I am extremely excited to share this platform with you, Su Chuang. And I am a regular listener to your podcast, hosted by my good friend in the industry from CIMB, as well as also my newly found friend from Endeavor. And in the presence of all of you, the dreamers, the doers in the ecosystem, in particular Datuk Syariel, and Su Chuang, I mentioned to you one of the best episodes I've heard from you. So I'm extremely excited to be here today. And I look forward to these honest conversations. You asked me to give a context. And this is one thing that I've learned in my life, just about turning 38. So relatively new in the journey. It's not about how you start. So you mentioned about Malaysia making headway with MSC in 1990s, but the most important part is how much we have progressed since then. And this is where the disappointment starts to creep in, because we haven't made enough progress. And there are a few gaps that still need to be filled. You mentioned about the funding gap. We still have about the supply gap of ecosystem and entrepreneurs. So if you ask me, it's about the progress, and we are lacking behind. In terms of funding, let me give you context. We created agencies in 1990s to spur venture investments, thinking that venture capital is our solution towards catalyzing innovations. But we haven't progressed because our venture capital and private equity is only about 14 billion. And how much professionals have we nurtured in the past 20 years? According to SC, it's only 344 registered professionals with more than 4 years experience. Where are we relative to our peers? We have more than 9,000 investment professionals in the private market in South Korea. We have more than 20,000 investment professionals in PE as well as VC registered track in Singapore. In terms of GDP, we have about 0.1% to 0.2% of venture capital relative to our GDP. Where are we compared to even Indonesia? 1.2. Where are we relative to the developed market like UK, which is not even the leaders in the pack of in terms of venture market, 8% of the GDP. So we are still lacking behind. You ask me whether we have made progress? No, unfortunately, we have not.
Well, that's very honest and very candid, Taufiq. But obviously, it's an entire structural framework. It goes beyond finance. It goes beyond supply of capital. It's also incumbent upon the entrepreneurs themselves to step up, right? So it's all about, as you say, Taufiq, it's not about how we start the game. Because if this was a chess game, we're still in the opening stages, as you say, right? In the first salvos, maybe the first 5 to 10% of the game. It's all about the mid game and then the end game, right? Technology is still very, very new in Asia, Southeast Asia specifically, right? Where do you think, because if we're going to try and pull up our socks, right? Where do you think are the fruits that can be plucked at this stage? Maybe Safuan, because if you can give us, the MRANTI, kind of, you've been MDEC as well. You've seen it from the private sector with DHL. You've been back, we've all been around the block a couple of times, right? Where can we pick up the fruits and really take it forward from here?
I think in terms of, if we speak about culture, one thing that I've observed is that we still have this fear of failure, that is prevalent among not just startups, not just entrepreneurs, but it's just that we don't celebrate failure enough. I feel that, and I've been with some of the startup groups, and this is where they make fun, I failed, but the more important thing is you pick yourself up, you move on, learn from your mistake, and try a new avenue in terms of what different angles can you try. Because if you believe in the problem that you're trying to solve, I think I tested this just now with Wafi. The first thing he asked in terms of, I'm going to start the startup, say, what's the problem that you're going to solve, right? And unfortunately, this is not unique to startups. We speak the same thing with researchers as well. We feel that, they normally come to us and say, I got this darn good product. Why nobody is buying the product or the solution? So normally I'll pause, to give the impression I'm thinking. And then I'll ask, when you decide to craft this product, who was the customer in mind? And normally get a longer pause from the other side because so there you go, right? Sometimes we are not clear. We rush into developing the product and solution without a clear understanding in terms of who are developing it with, what's the persona, I mean, the same thing I'm saying at startups, entrepreneurs, even at the universities, the researchers, the other agencies that we engage. I'll be very candid here as well, right? Although I represent government agency, but when I look at agencies, again, I talk about the number of agencies that we have, the kind of the programs that we have. I do have to be critical in terms of the agencies themselves need to work better together as well in terms of to understand what the other person is offering. So we spend a lot of time. We just visited CIRIM yesterday in Shalam. They have 25 buildings, 2,100 researchers, right? They have a lot of equipment, a lot of expertise, but we're not really harnessing that yet. So I think this is where I think that we really need to step up in terms of agencies per se, need to step up our game in terms of need to collaborate better with other agencies, need to get off our pedestal and go down to the ground, talk to the startup, talk to the funders themselves, yeah, because a lot of them have this expectation, especially when you talk about those who wants to take out in the product. I want a complete product. It doesn't happen that way, you know. You got to meet halfway, yeah. Understand in terms of what is the product for, and then customize it together, define the market, and then find a way in terms of how to push that product into the market.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, Safuan, because when you look at America, the fear of failure is non-existent. The fact that there are startups that come and go, and then they just pick themselves up, and then they go again, and then they go again, and they go again. And there is very little of that social taboo in America where failure is not frowned upon, whereas in Malaysia, it's a big face thing, right? Oh, your son failed, he went bankrupt, and that's it, go back to employment. It's very endemic in Asia specifically. But we also see that aversion to risk among the money people, right, Taufiq? And I'm just put this question to you as a generalization, because unlike in America where VC money, angel funds are very, very cognizant of the risk, they're quite willing to put money into 20 startups and just see one succeed and be happy with 19 failures. I mean, look no further than Masayoshi Son, for example. He's not American, but I mean, his failure rate is quite admirable, you know. The money people in Malaysia tend to be also quite risk averse. Is that a truism necessarily?
There are many inferences that you can make from those numbers that I have outlined at the start of this conversation. When you talk about capital funding, there are two things, right? Availability of capital and accessibility of capital. I'll try to get back to this risk-taking, because you need to understand this risk-taking activities is a result not only about the availability of capital, but also how the capital is formed, the capital formation side. So I mentioned just now the size of VC and PE market in Malaysia is roughly about 15 billion. I hope everyone in the room knows the size of equity market. I'm pretty sure Sophia and Rosie would know. It's about 1.7 trillion. So what does it mean? We have a lot of capital, but it's not a risk capital.
Sorry, Taufiq, repeat those numbers. So private equity venture capital money is 1.7...
No, 15 billion for
15
VC
billion.
and PE.
VC and PE
Yes.
versus 1.7 trillion in public equity market.
Which
So
is
that's-
obviously investment into mature
So that's below
companies.
1% lah.
Exactly. And even then, if you look at the equity market, it's relatively small because it's just about 1/10 of the size of GDP, right? Compared to the US, where the equity market is more dominant. Unlike Europe, unlike Malaysia, where debt market is more dominant. So debt as a capital is not a risk capital. So you need to understand availability of capital. Yes, we have a lot of liquidity in the system, but they're not necessarily supportive of innovation. They're not necessarily supportive of risk-taking activities. And you need to understand how this capital is formed. Like I said, we have a bigger debt market compared to equity market. And even within equity space, relatively small for venture capital. So that is the state where we are currently, right? Now, you talk about risk-taking activities. It's bigger. To me, ecosystem needs 3 types of capital or resources. You need financial capital, you need, of course, human capital, and you need network capital. That's how innovation ecosystem works, right? You need to leverage on partnership, collaboration, which is essentially network capital. And network capital, to me, the soul of network capital is risk-taking and risk sharing. And when it comes to finance, we deal with one big problem, and it is called information asymmetry. So why you are not taking risk is because you are not sure, right? That's why we have intermediation. That's why we have the bankers, because as individual depositors and savers, I do not know who to lend my money. I'm not good at making credit assessment. I leave it to specialized professionals who do this to solve my information asymmetry. I don't do as individual investors, maybe Datuk Sharil and some of the angels here, may be doing very well when it comes to due diligence and do investment directly. But most of us cannot take that due diligence, so we rely on venture capitalists. We rely on fund managers so that we identify investment opportunities. This is the problem because, one, we don't have that many professionals who knows the market. 344 registered so far. So it's not enough. We still have information asymmetry in the ecosystem, in the market, even though we may have huge supply of good entrepreneurs and ideas. We just can't spot them early enough, fast enough, quick enough, and appropriately value them. So we have another bigger problem. Even if we find them, we have high cost of capital because, again, we have information asymmetry. So when you have a cost of capital that is high at the start of your journey, what does it mean? You are closer to failure than success because you are obviously constrained by the amount of capital available for the next round. So my point is risk-taking is at the heart of it, but there are many issues that we need to solve. The intermediary side, the risk-taking, the risk capital, as well as, like I said, eventually we need to build an entire network and ecosystem.
Sounds like a mammoth problem, Taufiq. How do we address it? How do we take a constructive approach to solving this puzzle?
So that's why Penjana Capital was formed. I can be very honest with you, and Penjana Capital was formed is very much initiative driven. We just want to fight COVID. So it comes under Penjana Fiscal Package. Penjana is all about propelling businesses. We started with Prihatin, putting rakyat first, thinking that next month we're going to announce Penjana. But of course, a lot of people say not enough for SME, so we have Prihatin SME as a stopgap measure. But we are working towards supporting businesses in I think in July under Penjana. So how do we craft the Penjana Fiscal Package? We know, okay, what support do we need to give to large corporates? We gave a guarantee scheme under Dana Jamin, 50 billion. How do we solve the small and medium enterprises? We give soft loan, we give subsidized credit, we give grant. How do we solve micro? We give grant through Prihatin, Grant Khas Prihatin or JKP. How do we solve startups? So we realize we can just give grant, we can just give subsidized credit, subsidized loan, but it is not sufficient because we are not a good agent to appropriately value risk. So we need a VC to do that for us. So that's why our intervention was through a venture fund, venture investment, which is a fund-on-fund. So that's how Penjana was formed, very much initiative. As we progress, we realized that, hey, it can be catalytic, and it is a critical so-called ingredient for future growth. So that's why we realized that we need to put more effort in terms of supporting a venture market in Malaysia. We realized we don't have a venture market that is vibrant in Malaysia. Like you mentioned, roughly is dominated by government agencies. If you look at the statistic, how much of the VC market in Malaysia, about 48% of those capital comes from government agencies and government. About 20+% comes from sovereign wealth funds. You know who. So it's very much dependent on government, and government has a fiscal constraint. So that's why you need to actually invite a private sector participation. And there's a huge amount of capital available in the market, but they are in the private sector. So you need to entice this private sector to come and invest and undertake risks. So this is why the government comes with a fund-on-fund program with matching commitment. The government says that I will match every dollar that you put in a venture fund on a one-to-one basis. So that's how we actually, come up with this Dana Penjana National Program that is currently administered by Penjana Capital. So to answer your problem, we have several structural interventions. The government knows that government needs to be more active and be more strategic. So this is some form of the government intervention thus far. Budget 2023, because we had this chat, do you want to talk about budget that is not yet passed? There are a few signals coming from this budget. And as much as people mention this is a rakyat's budget, this is an election budget, there's a populist budget. If you do a comparison, this budget has more to say about venture investment and startups. 1.3 billion earmarked from the government through developmental expenditure for venture investment. That's big compared to last year, bigger, in fact, in recent budgets. We have a dedicated intervention through sovereign wealth funds, which is essentially a government asset. mostly from Khazanah through Dana Impact, which is allocated for targeted sector, so that we don't have that much capital. So when we invest, we want to create multipliers. So if you notice, some of the sectors currently, being championed by the government is actually agri-tech and food tech, and it's clear in the budget. We also use DFI, another avenue within MOF ecosystem to champion venture investment. Agrobank, Bank Pembangunan, all have a dedicated venture investments. If you notice from recent budget, in budget 2023. So these are some of the government intervention. Government realized we don't have much firepower, but it must be targeted. And it must solve structural problem, i.e. private sector participation in risk taking activities in the country.
So we know that capital is very efficient. It can be very efficient and has been very efficient, right? As you say, Taufiq, 7 out of every $10 available for venture funding in Malaysia comes from the public sector, not enough from the private sector. Why is it so thin? So is it because we don't have enough ideas here? You mentioned edutech, you mentioned food tech, agri-tech, right? Only for your point of view, Safuan, because you are in the trenches with the entrepreneurs, right? What are the, for example, the 5 most critical areas that you're looking at that will attract these funds, not necessarily from the public sector, but from the Sequoia capitals of this world, the KKRs of this world, the Andreesen capitals of this world? You know, this is big money. These are literally very, very clever money, the kind of money that we want to have in this country. What are the areas that will attract this kind of money, Safuan?
You asked me for 5, I can think of only 1. But I think the major one that I can
And
think
that one is?
the one I can think of right now is big funds looking for companies who can solve big problems. And that's something that I don't see enough. Yeah, a lot of the startups that I have had the opportunity to work with, solving problems although it is presented or pitched that it's big, but when we discuss, and then the problem is still very focused, very localized. Yeah, and I think this is where if those are local problems, it can't be expanded to regional and global. I don't think you'll be able to attract the global funds. Yeah, the interest of global funds. Now, I was just looking in terms of just now when Taufiq was mentioning in terms of the role of Penjana. Something that I also need to highlight is that what we see is that in terms of commercialization, yeah, the purpose of the startups, the entrepreneurs, the founders in this room, I think you set up the company not because for the fun of technology or for the fun of setting up companies or for the fun of chasing grants. Yeah, I don't think so. Well, I think it's just because you are driven by a bigger problem that you want to solve. Yeah. And I think in terms of when we talk about, and in order to solve those big problems, you need your product and solution to be effectively commercialized, adopted. Yeah. And I think this is where we felt and we saw there is a big gap in terms of that value of that exists between that TRL 4, 5, 6 or 3, 4, 5. Yeah. And this is where in terms of most product and solution or most research do not get to the market because it died in that valley of death. And again, this is the reason why MRANTI has been brought about, because MRANTI, again, for those who are not familiar with MRANTI, it is a combination of the agency previously called MAGIC. Yeah, it's been around for 2014, focusing on startups and startups ecosystem, as well as Technology Park Malaysia. It's been around for about close to 26 years, yeah, with the intention of a global science park. And then you have also another agency which is not really mentioned, but we brought the expertise on board, which is Platform Ventures. Yeah, was closed in 2020 December because the charter ends there. Yeah. So with the combination of the expertise and the program understanding of the ecosystem, it forms MRANTI with the intention of accelerating technology commercialization. That is the intention, yeah. And I think this is where the role that we play in terms of how do we accelerate. We accelerate, I think early on I did mention we need the ecosystem. Of course, we need the funds, yeah. We need to be able to harness the research that is currently locked in the universities. And this is one sore point to the government as well, because they spend billions of dollars in terms of funding research. Yeah. And then between RMK 9 and RMK 10, although we have grown our research output by 4.5 times, I think it is still only 8.3% is commercialized. So you get a value in terms of how much money that the government spend and how much is it getting in terms of return back on investment.
Yeah, so it's very easy to lament the fact that we don't have the example of a company that built a global music platform from a country of 5 million people. I'm referring to Spotify of Sweden, right? It's easy to lament that, and we don't have people who don't dream big and solve global problems. But do we need to? Because we live in the middle of ASEAN, and ASEAN has 650 million people, combined GDP about $3.5, $4 trillion nominally GDP, right? It's a very big captive market, which is very, very nascent. Do we need to solve global problems? Because as you say, Safuan, I mean, we've got universities that produce globally competitive research that is sitting in the dungeons waiting to be commercialized. What is holding that back?
I'm just going to jump back. I think if you run the tape back, I did not say global problem, I say big problems. Because I think big problems it exists in any country. Problem regarding food. Which country does not face food security problems? Problem regarding health. Which country does not say it doesn't have problem with health? Similarly, education. It's just that we need to be able to frame the problem in that context. I think because we are talking about what your point just now is to be able to attract big funds. Big funds want small returns? No, they want big returns. And you can't have big returns if you are solving a localized problem. So this is where in terms of, it's just that, it's not that I think it's just a matter of focusing on what do we need to do, because we got great companies, yeah? And I think some of them are actually in Endeavor. They want to grow big. They want to solve logistics issues. They want to solve education issues. And I mean, these are some of the currently in Endeavor right now, yeah? I think we can do it. It's just a matter of when we discuss, we just need to frame in that sense.
So which one comes first, the chicken or the egg? Because, I mean, money will come where the opportunities are. And Taufiq, you talked about how we've only got a ratio of 30% private sector funding. Then there's definitely something there. Where are the clues? Why is the ratio not higher?
So, because I represent Penjana Capital, so my question is all about capital availability and access. But risk taking is not just investors' job. So I just want to recap again. What is the government's initiative on how to solve this structural problem? We want to have a venture market, have intermediaries, have a better intermediation process, moving savings, capital to productive investment to support innovations and fast-growing startups. So that is government's structural intervention. We need to have more private sector participation. So the policy tools is matching commitment from the government, thinking that we can co-invest with the private sectors, hoping that we can diversify the risk and also bring down the risk, hopefully, to their investment. But risk-taking, you are asking the supply side to Safuan just now. And sorry, and I know I'm just going to give my 2 cents of views. This country needs to have an honest conversation. This industry, this ecosystem, you mentioned about, trying to solve the global problems. Our entrepreneurs, we have a good talent here. We have good entrepreneurs. But, why do we need to produce many more platform businesses of a market that is 33 million people when we have competitive advantage in other areas? We are focusing so much on digital economy, but don't forget we have a bigger economy, which is green economy, the agriculture, the energy that are ripe for innovations, that are ripe for disruptions. And we haven't actually explored that area yet. So I'm actually encouraging or throwing this challenge to our entrepreneurs to actually solve a bigger problem. That means a lot to the country, to the society that closer, to the regions, right? So that is about risk-taking. Don't just have a validation of time zone. It works buy now, pay later in Europe. It should be working in Malaysia. We love credit. You have to understand context. So risk-taking is not just on the part of the government, part of the private sectors. Entrepreneurs also have to play their role. And specifically for Malaysia, I think we have a bigger problem because we have a good success story when it comes to policy intervention by government, which is NEP. So we create a class of a professional class for Bumiputra. We fail to actually create or produce a class of Malay entrepreneurs. And it's not just Malays. We have we forget about building a true entrepreneurial ecosystem. I mean, some of us are parents in the room, so you better ask, are you okay with your kids, undertaking entrepreneurial ventures? I've got some industry friend here who has been in the capital market and fund management for 20, 30 years and decided at ripe golden age to start new ventures. How many of that stories have you heard in your circle? So risk-taking is not just capital. And it's not just financial capital. Risk-taking is bigger than that. It's actually a social capital. It's a mindset.
That's a more explosive remark than actually we might give it credit for, Taufiq. But the way this conversation is structured is we're going to take a little breather at the 30-minute mark and then have a 10-minute session where all of you can put up your hand and ask the two gentlemen anything you want, as controversial as you want, as speculative as you want. And this is basically the grilling session lah. So let's take the 30-minute mark now and start the 10-minute session where we have that basically burning issue platform. So which one of you would like to ask these two gentlemen a burning question? We have, of course, the commercialization expert here and, of course, the financial expert here. And the way we left it at the start of this time frame was maybe Malaysians are not, thinking big enough. Yes, Regina.
Someone who's willing to take the risk and be the first.
Hi, gentlemen. Okay, it was a really honest feedback from Taufiq, especially, and as well as MRANTI. I'd like to know, how are we positioning ourselves within ASEAN, given the fact that we talk about not dreaming big enough, of not getting our ideas to be able to get to a bigger market, right? 33 million versus 260 million Indonesia, right? How are we positioning ourselves to make sure that we are actually getting that pipeline, right? So from angel to all the way, and obviously Bursa is not exactly the sexiest thing as a final destination, right? So what are your observations on that? Thank you.
Right. You're right. When you are, a country of 33 million people, when your GDP is only about $400 million, $1 billion, you need to be focused. You're all entrepreneurs, savvy investors. Some of you maybe have a few business ventures in the past. Knows that managing capital is scarce, and managing capital is important. Similarly, for the country, we need to actually have more focus. We need to know where do we have a competitive advantage in the region. We are lucky because we are in the center of a region that is neutral diplomatically. That means we can actually play both sides. Right in the middle of a region that is rich with biodiversity. In the middle of a two worlds, and we have a new world order. So many things that we should be thankful of, but we need to know what is our competitive advantage. In business terms, what is our moats, right? That is a big question. My view is we have a few areas where Malaysia enjoys obvious and to me clear competitive advantage, and we can do very well in this space. Agriculture, we used to be an agriculture and commodity player. We are actually commodity superpower in the past, and to a certain extent still have our role in global economy. Our tins used to finance, British Empire, First World War and Second World War. We are second major producers of palm oil or palm. We are still, carbon natural gas exporter, major in the region. So energy is a sweet spot for us. And that is just fossil fuel, right? We haven't even talked about solar planet-based energy. our every part of Malaysia is actually has ocean front borders. We have a good tidal waves that can generate electricity. We have good rivers in Kalimantan, in Borneo, that can actually generate energy. We have good, caption of solar power on the north part of the peninsula for solar power. We have good hydro potential. So these are new disruptive energy that we can potentially champion. Agriculture, like I mentioned, energy is another. And also network and logistics, because nobody can take our geography, and geography is also a natural capital, so we should harness that in terms of connectivity. So that is just some of the, I think, competitive advantage that Malaysia enjoy. More importantly, I think, is to ask ourselves, what are we good at, right? That is a burning question. I had this conversation with Su Chuang, and I try not to get into this topic, but I think Su Chuang was expecting me to talk about capital flows. To be so-called economic superpower, you need to actually be friendly to capital, right? That's how capital finance innovations. And this is a tough question because this is a tough issue because nobody wants to talk about the transaction cost of moving capital in this country. We are still, to me, paying the price of the intervention after the Asian financial crisis of capital controls and currency pegging. So we need to know how long can we sustain this domestically driven investment without FDI. So this is, I think, another part of the question. So my point is, we need to know, even if we have a competitive advantage, this competitive advantage needs to be financed. So again, hard question.
Safuan?
Okay, thank you. So thanks for, initially it was a bit slow in terms of getting warmed up, and then here Taufiq mentioned, I think it's again, my position or MRANTI's position, and he asks another person in this room and say, no, that's not right, this is how the position should be. But this is based on our observation. I'm trying to be more direct, as precise as I can, Regina, to you in terms of when we talk about technology. Let's talk about socio-economic sectors and technologies. Yeah. So we've used the Academic Science of Malaysia, my STIE 10 by 10 framework. So it looks at 10 socio-economic sectors and 10 technologies. And within the matrix, you try and find what are the technologies driving those intersections. So I have to agree with Taufiq. We are going to focus on agri. We should put more focus on agri. We should also put focus on health. I think, without explaining further, the last 2 years has been a very traumatic 2 years. And we do not want to be spending more time at home with our children, right? That sounds wrong, but those parents, you get me, right? You want to do that 2 years, yeah? Being cooped up, contained with your children running around, yeah? Driving you nuts, right? I want to go back, suddenly I want to go back to office. So in terms of health, agri, and one technology sector that we're looking at is drones. And you may ask in terms of why. So, and this is something I'm very passionate about, yeah? Since, I think, many years now. Because you look at drones, it's actually the technology that really helps accelerate the socio-economic sectors that we're trying to focus early on. Agriculture, how do you automate? Yeah. So COVID, the 2 years was a great experience when we see the estates are just left as it is because we don't have the manpower, yeah, to even like cut the grass. Yeah? So we're so dependent. So we need to see in terms of how can we leverage the power of drones. And not only that, if you look at in terms of, not many in this room perhaps would know how many number of companies we have in terms of focusing on drones in Malaysia. We have about close to 200 companies. You may know the big fives, yeah? Or you may only know one. At least you know one, Aerodyne, yeah? The number one drone remote sensing as acknowledged by the drone industry inside. What about Aeonic/Polar Drone? Yeah, you have Ovotech, you have Meraki, and you have many more as well, but their names don't get mentioned. Their involvement is into agri, They are exploring in terms of sending medicines using drones, yeah, as in the case of Meraki. They even make the first water body crossing from Lumut to Pulau Pangkor, yeah. So we've done all those. We have competitive advantage, and I think we also have the recognition, yeah. And also in terms of this is where MRANTI comes in and support. If you have the opportunity to visit MRANTI Park one day, you'll come across this term called Area A57. Area 57. We're doubling down in terms of drones because we feel that there's one area of technology that we will see if you break the drone component of the payload as well as the platform, we can really scale up this all the startups, SME and SME as well involved in terms of the social economic sector there as well as technology. You're talking about cameras, you're talking about laser, yeah, you're talking about remote sensing. There's so many technology that goes into that drone. So again, trying to recap, yeah, these are the areas that we're doubling down, but we are not forgetting, for example, autonomous vehicle or electric vehicle, yeah. For information, MRANTI Park will host the 4th testing site in Malaysia. We just get our surat tiada halangan from DBKL. So we have 12 kilometers of road in MRANTI Park that we're dedicating for that. And also in terms of when we talk about health, our sandbox application, that the program that was launched in 2020. So the biggest number of application is regarding health. And this is where the biggest opportunity also lies in health. And the biggest obstacle is also in health. Yeah, when we see so many agencies within the Ministry of Health. But this is what we are trying to do. It's not about money. It's about pulling those agencies together, put them in one table and understand, okay, there's a huge economic impact here or social impact here. What does agency like MRANTI needs to do? How do we work with Cradle? Yeah? How do we work with Penjana?
But I just want to raise the bar again. Not that necessarily I agree with drone, but it's a black box, and that's why MRANTI exists, and that's why I want to invite the entrepreneurs and would-be entrepreneurs to challenge yourself. Drone next. What's next for drone? Everyone knows the bigger opportunity for drone is actually on the transportation side. And that is the black box that we need to solve, the sandbox, right? Can we commercialize everyone? Can we put a delivery through drones, send parcels? So these are the things that we are currently exploring, just beyond agriculture. And the opportunity is bigger, the market size is bigger. So that is the next frontier for drone. But the issue here is, do we have a competitive advantage in that space? Yes, we do. We are not dense like Singapore. And we are not too porous like South Korea. So we're just sweet spot. So just Google, do some basic research. 33 million people, the size of Malaysia. The ratio is just nice.
Right, so to entrepreneurs in the room and virtually, challenge issued by both Safuan and Taufiq. Dream bigger, dream of solving global problems, and the money is there, and the commercialization opportunities are there. I think we've got time for one more burning issue. Gentleman in the blue shirt.
Testing. Okay. Yep. Sorry, it's a bit awkward. Okay. Horowitz from CGS-CIMB. I think the focus was in terms of being an entrepreneur to solve big problems, right? And what I've been hearing is more towards the social aspect in terms of health, in terms of all the social aspect to it. But I think one thing in terms of entrepreneurs-wise, today, the issue is in terms of sustaining the business. For example, like Kaudim or Happy Fresh or Carsum, for example, the first unicorn in Malaysia, letting go a lot of workers. I think just want to know in terms of your experience, right? What can you actually inspire? What's the problem here for these companies who are going bust because of the fact that, maybe the climate is not there? Maybe Happy Fresh, for example, or Kaudim was at the moment of time 7 years ago solving a problem of convenience. Of my aircon is, Rosat, for example, I know who to go to. They are solving a problem, but maybe it's not the big problem in terms of health or the social aspect of agriculture, but how can businesses and entrepreneurs actually sustain it?
Safuan?
Yeah, thank you. Haris from CGS-CIMB. So I think in terms of the issue, if I may look at it from a different aspect, right? This is a startup. right? And the startups, they do fail, right? So if we accept that startups do fail, and sometimes it also takes advantage of the kind of environment that they are in right now. And once we have surpassed that, if they are still providing the same service, it's not just startups, it's like agencies as well. They become irrelevant, or they are not as fast as their competitors. No matter what we do to sustain, they will close. It's just putting in, maybe a bit harsh, good money chasing bad money. Yeah? I think it's just that I have accepted the fact that businesses, startups, entrepreneurs, those of you who are thinking of starting up startups with the hope of becoming a unicorn or a unicorn. No, I'm not going to dampen your ambition. You should, especially if you have less obligation. Now is the time for you to make as many failures as possible. But I have a principle, what you call in terms of when in my team, you can fail. You should fail. You should try and have the experience of failing. Yeah? Because you're not a good startup if you don't fail. And I think that this one we mentioned about the culture, the risk aversion of failure. Go fail. There's also a slogan, fail fast. Yeah? But I think it's just the point of that is, again, I won't be preaching. I don't want to preach to the startup here because you guys probably know better than I do when it comes to failure. Yeah, but it's just that it happens. Yeah, and we want to make sure that the business, the startups, the entrepreneurs that we support can really flourish. And also, it's not the responsibility of the government, for example, agencies like us, yeah, to make sure that the startup continues to be sustainable over a long period of time. Market forces, demand and supply should dictate whether or not you are required or not. If you're not required, as simple as that. Pivot, right? I'm not going to say fail. I'm not saying exit. Pivot. There's another word that we all need to know as well. Pivot. Yeah, for those of you who have been old enough, you'll see the Friends episode where Ross say pivot, pivot, pivot. Yeah? Okay, I didn't expect you to be that old. But yeah, so pivot means change your perspective, change your business offering, find the new market, find the sexiness in that market, and start targeting those opportunities. I hope that helps, Haris.
So,
Yeah.
Harry, I just want to add, if you don't mind, Su Chuang, because I hope once we end this conversation, hopefully you go home with some key takeaways, right? There are things that you need to know. The startup journey. Either you sell something that people do not want, so there is no product market fit yet, right? So that is something that you need to pivot quickly. People just do not buy your service. People just don't buy your products. There is no product market fit. But the example you gave is actually those that actually have proven to have product market fit, but that yet they fail. And this is, I think, you need to know about two things, right? The structural issue, and the cyclical part. The structural here is to understand your business model, right? We still have businesses, big businesses, unicorn, decacorn, that are still not generating profit because of the business model. They have not yet established the economic modes for them to create the stickiness. Simple example, you mentioned Kaltim. You mentioned maybe potentially you need to look at Grab, Uber. There's no economic mode. If I don't get my ride, I will just move to AirAsia ride. I'm not loyal. And there is low barriers to entry. The purchasing power is on the part of the buyers. Similarly, if I don't get the food from Grab, I just go to Foodpanda at no cost to download those apps. So you need to know is the business model. What business model are you adopting and how you create that economic modes fast enough after you establish product market fit. Now, cyclical. And this is the issue that I think a lot of us fail to understand. You need to look at your capital structure because you finance those business from the capital structure. You know why? Because your business are all loss-making. You are still in the valley of death. How much, how quick, how adequate you raise capital? You need to ask this question. Can I last for 6 months? Can I last for more than 6 months, 12 months? You need to anticipate that capital needs. And you also need to know the instruments where you want to raise those capital, because it comes with costs, which will eat up your working capital. So this is a question that entrepreneurs need to know. And I know it sounds like this is a part of MBA class, but we fail to teach this to our entrepreneurs. And sometimes you raise capital from, I don't know, people who, cost of equity is already high and it's small, it's subscale, it doesn't help. And you go and tapping the market every 6 months. If people go to CIMB and ask for rights issue every 3 months or 6 months, I think it's collapse the stock. Right? So that is the question you need to ask. When you raise big, that lasts for a certain cycle. So that is a question, hard question that, Haris, you need to answer.
So what are the lessons that entrepreneurs need to know when it comes to raising capital? Not everybody is well versed in the capital raising process. I mean, before they engage a consultant or before they engage a platform, what are the things that they should know, Taufiq?
Yeah, again, you need to understand why you raise capital and what is it for, and from whom. Sometimes the capital is not just about money. Sometimes it's the network, market access, strategic partnership. So these are the hard questions that you need to know. So look at your balance sheet, see how you want to finance your investment and working capital, and from whom, right? So this is the question, basic questions. Every banker would have to go through that.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, just want to segue from what Taufiq has mentioned. Your journey is going to be tough for those of you who wants to be a startup. Yeah, but you don't have to undertake this journey alone. I think that's also the reason, one of the reasons that for Endeavor, right? As was mentioned, high impact startups tackling, basically global. Similarly as well, it's you can work with agencies, and I would like to invite you to try and explore working with MRANTI. Yeah, and it's not I'm not trying to market MRANTI here. Yeah, it's just that we understand that, again, as mentioned, we have been in the market providing the services, accelerator, incubator, since Magic Days. We know enough in terms of what not to do. And so we know the people who is in the market that we can actually tap and actually learn from as well. Yeah. We don't know everything, but I think we know enough in terms of what not to do and who you can actually work with. And then we've seen our fair share of successes as well. And these are the ones who are really the one who knows how to network. And I like to, again, borrow what Taufiq has mentioned. When we talk about capital here, don't just think about money. Sometimes it is in the form of what you need is more in terms of visibility. You got a great product, but it's not visible. You don't pitch that well. Yeah, it's okay. Nobody speaks like Steve Jobs on the first day of their pitching, right? Learn. So which is what we do as well in terms of what we provide in terms of our program, is to teach you how to pitch, to understand investment better, to make you investment ready. I mean, the language that you probably have heard is technology readiness level, yeah, business readiness level, business readiness level. Because what we try to do at MRANTI is not just talk about technology, because technology is so dry. And I just shared with these two gentlemen up front, one of my biggest goal or my role is to inject fun in MRANTI. Yeah, we live, our life is short enough. We need to have fun. So it's just that really in terms of trying to find that ecosystem that you can leverage on, the mentors that you can leverage on, the programs that you can leverage on as well. Yeah, the people with money that you can leverage on. Yeah, so it's just not about resources. It's about being resourceful.
So apropos what you're talking about, Taufiq, the entrepreneurial journey is one which is comprising of blood, sweat, tears, pain, isolation, loneliness. It's tough. And actually, a question came in from the audience earlier, and they wanted to ask both of you, how do you deal with the down days? Because the down days, when you're starting out, when times are tough, it can be really down. I mean, especially when your friends have got jobs, that they've got good salaries, they're being promoted, and then you're in the trenches. You've got no salary, no time, your health is suffering, you're eating Maggie mee every day, right? How do you, what advice can you give these guys in dealing with the down days?
I saw the other day a comic strip, a comparison between a guy in a prison and a startup. So the comment was that at least the guy in prison, they get one hour of break, yeah, and 3 square meals a day. And as a startup, it is tough life. But I think this is where, in terms of facing your down days, is you go back to your core in terms of what's the reason, in terms of what triggered you to really kick off that startup. And I think it helps, And there are one or two in this room which, our down days is just playing board games until 4 a.m. in the morning. And there are some startups here as well, which I do that with them. Though I'm not a startup, but I know they're having their down days, yeah? So if I need to lose to make them feel better, I lose. But in that board game. But I think in terms of, look deep, in terms of find, in terms of that the reason for existence, in terms of why you want to create that startup. And again, give it a hard look, yeah? And the end thing also about, one thing helps is I'm optimistic by nature, right? I always see that if I do this, I can impact lives. And that's the reason in terms of, after working in DHL, I go back to the people like, why, right? Why do you come back to the agency? It's because the life that we are given the opportunity to improve. Ladies and gentlemen, no other complicated explanation, is just simply that.
Okay, a bit of life story, because I'm actually, I was suffering from mild dyslexia when I was a kid. So a slow starter. That's why, to me, it's not about how you begin your journey. It's always about the progress. It's all about the race. It's all about the journey, not the starting point. So that's one. So one thing I realized when I was growing up is reading. Reading is an escapism, apart from my imaginary friend. One. He's been very close to me. But anyway, coming to that, so it's a form of escapism. But I realized eventually it is actually a source of pleasure. And I remember from one of my favorite authors, I mentioned this to Adeline, not sure, written 150 years ago, A Tale of Two Cities. It's the best of time is the worst of time. It's a season of light, season of darkness. That famous phrase. Then I realized, there's two sides of a story. When it's a crisis, there's an opportunity. It is a cycle. That's how nature evolves. So you need to know that. Don't take it too much on yourself. That's one. And I realized when I was in my first job, I remember having witnessed this when my ex-boss was actually scolded by the bigger boss. And the advice given to my ex-boss was, in life, sometimes you need to be able to learn how to laugh at yourself. So I remember this. There are things that are not your control. Don't take it too hard. Yeah. But coming back to averting crisis or turning crisis into opportunities, this I would like to bring your attention to. Some of you who likes politics may remember Donald Rumsfeld. He didn't achieve much, but one thing I recall about him is his famous classification of risks, which is known now. You call it anything, black swan, whatever. It's very simple. Known to unknown, unknown to unknown, known, known. It's all about preparations. You need to identify the risk in advance. So when you having, identified, you can prepare towards that. So this is one of the mitigations tools to avert crisis or to avert so-called catastrophic outcome. So yeah, do simple things. Do a lot of homework. That gives you a higher probability of not, having stress later part.
How do you prepare for something you don't know about? Because earlier you talked about this new world order, right? That's starting to become a bit more mainstream now. This is essentially the shift in economic power from the West to the East, and it's the China-US, conflict. How do entrepreneurs deal with this future?
So two things, Suchuang. We are in a network economy. So there's one time where people thought that there's no black swan, but because of the, knowledge, dispersion of knowledge, because of interaction, you discover there is a black swan somewhere in the world. So it is, the point I want to make is, I don't think, I was actually scratching my head to identify what is the unknown unknowns. Because what seemingly unknown is actually quite a clear knowns. Like you mentioned geopolitics, a new world order. We talked about it in 1989. Francis Fukuyama talked about the end of history. It didn't happen, right? And everyone talk about it. It's not going to be end of the city. We still have a two world order. We talk about this. I mean, we prepared for that. We talk about pandemic. Everyone talk about there is a potential virus pandemic. Bill Gates talk about it. They need to spend and prepare the world towards bigger pandemic, but we're still unprepared. So I'm still scratching my head to really realize what are the unknown unknown. What seemingly unknown is actually known knowns. Clear story I shared with Endeavor a few months back is Y2K. It's unknown. We thought it's going to collapse on the first day of the new millennium. So we prepared towards that. So it became a known unknown. We prepared. No calamity. Traffic light was working. Our PC was working because a lot of, conceivable efforts have been undertaken to avert catastrophe on the first day of the new millennium. So again, I mean, just an example. There's seemingly every risk that can be handled.
So there's nothing we don't know, essentially, which hasn't been visited upon us in history. So I think that's a fair point. I'm going to give you guys a couple more questions and then move to the Q&A. This actually came in from the audience virtually a few days ago, and it asks of both of you, what are the key sectors that investors are focusing now? Is it still B2B? Is it B2C? Is it subscriptions? Is it BNPL? What are the juiciest sectors now that money is flowing to? Maybe Safuan, then Taufiq.
Based on what we observe, again, this is we're looking at from the socio-economic as well as from a technology perspective as well. Yeah, so health is up there. Yeah, agri is up there. Business financial services is also there. Yeah, so we're talking about blockchain. It's there, but there are other areas that we are also seeing good strides, is like advanced material. So startups and entrepreneurs that are into advanced material, be it construction material, or is it for example, you can have a lot of marry that with sustainability as well. Yeah. So the other day we saw using the drone example, a pioneer using banana fibers to construct that into a drone platform. Again, I don't know how far this will be, but I definitely believe in that advanced material is an area that we should be looking into. Yeah, I'm saying that these are the ones that I can safely say. Yeah, we should be spending a lot of time there. Yeah.
I want you guys to focus on a bigger economy, which is a green economy. ESG has been, discussed openly. But let me put things in perspective. Environment. For environment, sustainability, you need to fix 3 sectors. You need to fix energy, you need to fix your food system, you need to fix your transport. Major pollutants, 3. So these are the areas of opportunity. On the social space, we have done so much damage to our social environment and also physical environment in the past few years. I mean, technology gives and takes. I'm talking about the social media. So this is also interesting space to look at on how we engage. I mean, people still talk about the opportunities that Web 3.0 would offer to all of us. So explore. This is a blue ocean for all of us, a new social landscape on how we interact, network, and engage with one another. So yeah, that's on the social part. On the governance part it's about solving that integrity is still an issue within the entrepreneurs ecosystems. Who faked it till you make it,
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm raising another hard question.
Yeah, you're referring to Adam Newman, are you? Just joking.
You're right.
Yeah. Okay, let's open the floor to questions. Obviously you can ask the 2 gentlemen anything. Microphones are next to you. That object that's next to you and the thing, you can bend it and talk into it. So yeah, raise your hands and ask the two gentlemen, your questions. And anything that's under the sun is possible, right? Because what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
I think Haris wants to press the mic.
Right,
but he's not
man
sure.
in the blue brown shirt. Yeah.
Hello, hello. Oh, so I also have a question regarding the funds. Like just now, you were mentioning there were favorable sectors that funds are looking into. So does that mean that those that are unfavorable, like funds would not put money into them? They would sort of like don't put enough attention to these companies, to these startups?
Well, I think it's just that it's all about the for an agency, we are putting money in terms of an area that we can double down because it solves a national grand challenge. Yeah, food security is a national grand challenge. So if you ask me, food tech, yeah, agri tech, it is an area that we want to focus. How do you maximize the production per square foot or per square meter? Yeah, do you stack it up? Because land is going to be a resource issue. Yeah, so we also have a lot of infrastructure. The folks down in Iskandar were wanting to toy in terms of how can we use the space that we have inside building and rooftops as well to address agri-tech issues. So I think even in those areas, yeah, it's quite large. I mean, drone, because of the technology relating to the payload, relating to the platform, health, it's not just the medicine or the vaccine. It's about about a month ago, we launched the Health Tech Hub initiative, a collaboration between the Ministry of Science and the Ministry of Health. Yeah. So we're not just looking at vaccines per se. For example, we have quite a number of notable local companies that are producing robots that can ferry medicine from one ward to the other ward. Yeah, I mean those are interesting stuff because a lot of the nurses, if you look at them, it seems that they are working in a very okay kind of environment, right? Yeah, walk in their shoes, empty the bedpans, drain out the urine bag. Try that. And you suddenly see that, hey, there's good opportunities there. They're wasting a lot of time doing that, and it's dirty, it's potentially harmful, and it's also demeaning as well. So when we talk about health tech, it goes to that area as well. Yeah. So it is sufficiently big to me. If I look at if it's just focusing on agri, health, yeah, and drones, there's a lot of things that we can actually look at. That doesn't mean that the government won't fund. It's that you got to find the right agency. One thing that we would like to have this culture within the government is that it's no wrong door policy. If I don't have the answer, perhaps my sibling in most years have such facilities or intervention to assist you. But it's just that it takes that courage to come and talk to us. And also, sometimes, yeah, literally there's nothing much that we can do. You have to accept that as well. But we will try.
Early stage, later stage. Early stage, finding that product market fit, right? So to answer your question, you really need to understand the problem you're solving. Is there already demand for that services or solutions or products that you have in mind? I mean, case in point, healthcare, right? Health tech. Don't just copy whatever you have in the US and thinking that it might work in Malaysia. We still have a problem that is very foundational. If you've been, go. I mean, have an open mind, go to the ground. That's how you understand the pulse of the market and the populations. We still have a problem in terms of archiving that medical records. Before you talk about connecting people to service providers, basic record is not digitalized yet, it's still analog. So we still have problems for the government, which is a major customer for the healthcare service in Malaysia. So how do you solve government's problem? So you need to understand the customer you will be selling to, whether there is a solutions to their problems. I mean, I give an example. So you need to digitalize that. Very simple. I mean, I had the opportunity to go on the ground during pandemic, where I was actually discover this case where this old man had to go to another district because there is not enough medical supply for him. He has been going to the same hospital monthly. It's just that they didn't stock up. Why? Because there is no proper inventory management system. It's still analog. That's a problem that needs to be solved. It really matters to the government, right? I mean, if you're selling to the government. So you need to know your client, need to know the solutions you are. So that is early stage product market fit. But after that, you need to realize about how to scale up, right? And this is where VC, you mentioned sector specific, yes. But actually, to be honest with you, they just like a business that is less capital intensive, is not geared. They're talking about their risk takers, but actually they are also looking for investment that is less of a risk to their investors. So here you need to know how you want to make sure that you can actually, reduce your operating or increase or improve your operating leverage, and also make sure that you have enough income and also debt gearing to service whatever capital you raise. So here, that's business model. Have a real serious thought about that.
Thank you for the answer.
Hi. Hi, my name is Brian. I'm from Firefighter Industry. We are a 48-year-old company, so pretty old. Since you mentioned question anything under the sun, so I have a question under the sun. Basically, just riding off what Faris mentioning about sustainability. So my question is, what is being done, and is enough being done to sustain older businesses? Because yes, we're always talking about startups, new companies, entrepreneurs, but what about these companies that found success maybe 40, 50 years ago? There is a problem as well as sustainability of these companies, right? Sometimes they fail to innovate, and a lot of times it's because they're too big to fail. So my question to you is, what is being done, and is enough being done? Thank you.
I think for sustainability, the clear difference between now and 2000, 20 years ago, is that the government's commitment towards driving change. And it's very much institutionalized, the commitment, through COP27. So you see that, right? Famous case is John Doe in Kleiner Perkins. Why Kleiner Perkins fell from tier 1 VC to become tier 2? Because he bet heavily on clean tech. He invests in every single electric vehicles in the US except Tesla. Right? And every single investment in that space failed, right? But he was the one who spot the need for clean tech. He even recruited Al Gore to join Kleiner Perkins. But it's too early. So this is where you come too early into the market, right? But now it's different because, again, we have government support, we have institutional supports, and the commitment is real. So we have somehow removed some of the barriers to market within that sustainability, in particular clean tech or environment in this case. Another point I think I want to bring up is this. I think, again, this is very speculative. When I was growing up, I read this, right? It's close to Armageddon, it's close to the end of the world when people turn religious, stuff like that. And like it or not, because of generational shift, we realize there's something wrong about our system. Okay? I mean, if you read Neil Ferguson, right? 6 killer apps, which is the operating system, but he just called it killer apps. He is very much influenced by the reading of, Adam Smith. Institutions and ideas that separate civilizations, that according to Adam Smith, 1774, Wealth of Nations. So he came out with 6, among others, competition, modern medicine, science, consumerism, work ethics, and rule of law, which is rooted in the property rights, John Locke. Incentivize people to accumulate wealth. That drives civilization. Okay, but the center of it is consumerism and capitalism. That's where I'm trying to get at. But people realize that the capitalism model that we have is not working. And this is 5 secular forces, in my view, that you need to be mindful of. We are moving from disinflation environment to inflation environment. So much monetary liquidity injected into the system. So we are paying the price, slightly slow, but we're moving towards inflation environment. Number 2, because we have monetary excesses, now the balance moves towards fiscal excesses, right? 3, what's the issue? Because of unbalanced globalization, we focus towards more isolations. And this is important context because why? because we realize capitalist is not working, market-driven capitalist is not working. We want to go back to stakeholder capitalism and populism. And eventually, we realize the growth that we want is not of unequal growth, but inclusive. And this is real because generational shift. We have seen how capitalism move, right? And if you read, Creative Destruction, if you read, I can't remember the economist, but the point is capitalism is the biggest enemy to itself, right? So we are at that pivotal point where capitalism is transformed. So we're moving towards more sustainability, stakeholder capitalism.
That was fantastic. Yeah, and for a 48-year-old company, we can think of, don't forget that Apple and Microsoft and IBM are probably older than that. So, obviously Microsoft is $1.5 trillion, Apple is 2.2, and they're continuing to break new ground. Any more questions from the floor?
Just wanted to
Safuan, yeah, go on.
just wanted to share. Those of you who may know Brian would also know that he is the chairman for the FMM SMI Youth. What was it? Yeah.
Federation of Malaysian Manufacturers, yeah.
Correct. And I think I when I study the question, I understand in terms of there's a story in terms of how I met Brian. In fact, if you don't mind, Brian, I'm gonna embarrass you a bit. Yeah, I met this couple. Yeah, probably about I don't know 7 years ago. Yeah, one by the name of Jeffrey, another one by the name of Michelle. Yeah. And I was introduced to the business that they are growing, which is in the fire extinguisher business, firefighter. So I was talking to Jeffrey. Jeffrey was so excited, how to embrace technology, pulled Michelle as well and say, Michelle, come listen to this guy, yeah. And they were talking about transformation of firefighter, yeah. And I really don't know how to assist them, but lucky is just that when you look at they brought Brian back from the US, yeah, and he's now the chief innovation for firefighter. And I think for SMEs, first of all, they need to have the realization in terms of wanting to transform, wanting to harness the power of digital, wanting to take opportunity, because he can't do this job alone if the Jeffrey and Michelle are not bought into his idea. Similarly as well, I think that majority of the SMEs are like that. Yeah, the business works, right? Why do you want to rock the boat? Yeah. So if let's say you want to introduce digital technology, I think it's about understanding in terms of what the uncaptured opportunities, yeah, or the opportunity costs if they were to continue like that. I think the conversation is different than how we need to engage. If I were to take the agency in terms of responsible, in terms of the transformation of SME, the language needs to be slightly tailored to, it's not that they don't want to change. One thing they fear is losing the market. That is quite sure, market share. But it's just that how we engage has to be different. So I think in terms of, we won't talk about the SMEs, probably we need to have sort of like a different session with FMM, trying to see how do we want to tackle the old guards.
Yeah, why would Lim Wee Chai change Top Glove? It's profitable making, rubber gloves, right? It's not the most technologically advanced business in the world, but he makes one of every form. Life is good. Why should he innovate, right? So conceptually, I think owners want to change, but maybe to put into practice, different matter. Any other questions from the floor? Gentleman in the white shirt.
Yeah, cool, thank you. I want to ask a little bit of a question on the availability of funding and attracting additional funding into the ecosystem. So you mentioned, Taufiq,
Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sorry. My name's Kevin. I'm with Indelible Ventures, a foreign VC that is focused on Malaysia. So you mentioned the 15 billion of PE. I imagine that the vast majority of that is more PE, which is more similar to public markets in the way that it's focused on more mature businesses and so forth. Very little actually sits towards the VC funding the early innovations. And so you also mentioned that the majority of the capital is government related and that there's a need to catalyze the additional capital. There's also going to be a need in order to attract more capital from abroad into the market. So I'm curious, when you look at tackling that, because I can tell you from firsthand experience that coming into Malaysia is very, very difficult to establish a presence. So when you look at trying to catalyze that capital, aside from, doing more agencies, doing more that, which is kind of crowding out as opposed to attracting in, what are the mechanisms to actually get foreign capital interest? Because currently it's just sitting in other markets.
Thank you, Kevin, for that question. Popular solutions or proposed solution would be we need to improve profiling, branding, which is, need to be done, right? Because people need to know the opportunity sets available here so that the money will chase after these opportunities. But that's one side of the story. That capital not only find its destination, but also need to be facilitated in terms of flows. And we have huge transaction costs in this country. Capital comes here, whether it can go out, whether you raise capital here, can it go out? It's all transaction costs. And that leads to higher cost of capital in this country, which make us not competitive relative to our peers in the region. So that capital flows, the transaction costs of these capital flows need to be addressed. So profiling, branding to show the opportunity set, but also improve on the capital flows. That is the solution needed to attract those FDI to come back to their country. That's one. Number two, the difference between Malaysia in 1990s and Malaysia now is that we have so much risk-taking activities then than now. So these risk-taking activities, so-called attitude towards risk is important, right? Because return comes with risk, and return comes because of risk also. So that needs to be back. The excitement needs to be back in the market, and and that's a function of risk-taking.
Can I ask, because you touched on the one thing of the branding at the very beginning of it, and I think that there is a big branding problem out there, that there's not enough awareness. I mean, there are a lot of Malaysian entrepreneurs that are solving big problems. There's lots of them, but you don't ever read about them in Tech in Asia or any of the local publications. Tech in Asia is basically a Singapore and Indonesia publication. Very rarely do you see otherwise. So how do you elevate those in order to get more awareness in the region, outside of the region, where the familiarity with venture capital is stronger, and get them coming out? Because generally they go high population market, they go Singapore and assume, hey, I can touch everything from there.
Well, I think just drawing the experience that, or the program that I ran in MDEC, yeah. The program was called Global Acceleration Innovation Network, or GAIN in short, and I'm responsible for visibility. And we approached that in putting it into 4 quadrants. I mean, the visibility, it's all on, start with on. So on paper, online, on air, on stage. It's quite simple, quite straightforward. I mean, Aerodyne was the first, guinea pig, yeah? Because we look in terms of, definitely all the startups requires visibility, but it's just that we also looked at the capability of the founder to see where we can position them best. We worked at that point in time with DNA, yeah, among others. Yeah, business, I can't remember, a few other, it's been quite a while. So even Vulcan Post as well. Just because of the intention of pushing the visibility, right? Those who can't speak, can't speak well, yeah? So we put them on paper first. So which means I have a team of writers that writes, articles about them, and then we'll push that online. And then at the same time, we provide them this necessary capability development skill so that they are then gain a lot more confidence and fluency to go on stage as well as on air, yeah? So those are some of the things that is done. But I also have to say that at that point in time, engaging the startups, I don't feel that they feel that it's important. we try. We even approach scale-ups, and we would pair them up with people who can write for them. They don't just want to pay for it. Say, MDEC, can you pay for it? Hey, this is for your own visibility, right? I can help you, but I think the first time, second, third, fourth, it's got to be on your own cost, right? This is marketing costs. I mean, this is also in terms of looking at how the government, what the government can do. Of course, we help elevate some of the companies that is currently with Indelible Ventures as well. Run Cloud, yeah, work very close with Arif. I can't put Arif at that point in time on stage yet, yeah, if you understand what I mean. But we can definitely put them on paper and online. But I'm happy to see him now. He can speak better. We also work with Midwest, I think a company that you also, and I love Sidhu and what he tries to do. That guy speaks well, right? You know him well. I think that the area that he's in as well is also super interesting. And we want to help Midwest Composite in terms of raising the visibility. And that can be done by adding another sort of like MRANTI can help in terms of promote in our circles as well. So I say, yeah, sometimes, you know, you don't see them in papers. That doesn't mean that there's no visibility. It's just that for us, we are not in the A&P. We are not responsible for the startups A&P, you know, but we do help them in terms of raising their visibility in the right circles.
So my proposed solution would be very simple. For the government, we have many or a few agencies, EDB-like, EDB equivalent, but they need to have the right stories to tell and the right people to tell who understand what they're telling or what they're marketing about, right? And you know, so my point is, we need to spend profiling branding like EDB's approach. That's the government. For the VCs, our VCs need to actually expand its network. Most of the deal sourcing, some of the deals we've seen, good mega deals in Indonesia, supported by foreign VCs, Silicon Valley, is because they rely on local VCs for deal sourcing. So you need to have that expand. For example, Excel rely on EC Ventures to find a good spot in good opportunities in Indonesia. So the local VCs actually take the early stage investment supported by Excel, supported by Silicon Valley, Series B onwards. So we need to have that strategy. Our VCs need to expand its network beyond these borders. For the startup community, success breeds success. So we need to celebrate the success of our fellow entrepreneurs because that brings visibility, that money returns can be made from this market.
I think we've got time for one or two more questions from the audience, gentlemen.
Hi, I'm Zikri. I run an accommodation business called My Rehat. So I'm just wondering, is there like a platform that entrepreneurs can go to if they have issues or certain, basically just to talk? Also, well, basically I'm facing like, not say a situation, but basically, you know, in Malaysia, it's quite easy to do small bad things. So in the accommodation business, one of the issues is like electricity usage. So now I've come to the, found out that there are many players out there who kind of like, you know, you just find somebody in TNB and they can rejig your electricity usage. So for example, if you pay 800 ringgit a month, they can make it 200. So it's more like, how do you, I mean, I'm still thinking about it, whether I want to do it or not, because because it's easy to get away with, because I have 30 units, so other people have been doing it for years, and they don't get caught. So it's just things like this entrepreneurs face. Is there a platform or somebody just to trash out, so you don't, so these thoughts don't, because it's already the third day, I'm still thinking about it, because you know, it could save like 10 to 15% of your cost. All right, that's it.
Who wants to take that?
We have many agencies in this country,
Yeah.
so I'm pretty sure they are open to entrepreneurs like you. On the supply side, entrepreneurs, agencies like Cradle, MRANTI, these are the agencies that you should talk to. On the funding side, in terms of demand for capital, it comes from agencies like Penjana Kapital, MEFCAP, among others. But let me tell you one thing, right? Network is not built like a plantation. It's not linear. Network is, you know, a complex web. So you guys thrive if you have your own community yourself. Don't expect the government to create a platform for you to network. That's my point. Even though the government has enough platforms in this country for you to reach out to, but for you as a startup community, network is built like a complex web. And that's where the power of network multiplies. Metcalf rule. Network to the power of 2. Sorry, I don't know whether I'm talking gibberish. Again, I'm still suffering from dyslexia. I don't usually talk more than this.
There's no power more powerful than the power of Metcalfe's law, networking. I'm afraid we've run out of time, gentlemen and ladies. Thank you, both of you, Safuan and Taufiq. Huge honor, huge privilege to have both of you on at the same time. And I'm sure you'll be amenable to questions offline with at the Makan place later. So all of you, thank you for coming. And it was a great pleasure. Back to you, Andreesen.